Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the podcast that shares ideas on how to upgrade your lead generation. Here is your host, Glenn Schmeltzley.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today, we're going to talk about the Reengineered Salesforce and how marketing should react. But first, I want to mention that we're coming up to our 100th episode. I think that's worth saying thanks. I've got a special way of doing this. If you've been listening to past episodes, we've featured some books, and through the generosity of the author, I have some books to give away. You don't have to do much to be eligible for the draw that I'm going to hold. We're simply going to take people who have put their emails in on the email sign up on the website or mentioned us on social. That's it. Come back to us by June 30th of 2022, and I'll make sure you're in the draw. So to today's show. In the B2B world, the last 2 years have taken sales reps from Vroom to Zoom. This is only one of the many changes that enterprise sales is facing. Now, marketing is sales' dance partner, and we have to dynamically adjust to sales' changes. I wanted to get an inside view from someone who's been at industry events and who has his finger on the pulse of enterprise sales. My guest has a passion for revenue generation, and it all began at a little-known company called Watcom, which actually came out of the University of Waterloo in Ontario. It was there where he helped the company grow, and they eventually got acquired by Sybase. That's when he decided he wanted to go out on his own and co-found a company called Virtual Causeway, which is focused on helping scale up companies who've made it through their startup phase. He has an undergraduate degree and an MBA from Wilfrid Laurier University. He's a Quantum Shift Fellow with the Ivey School of Business, a past recipient of the 40 Under 40 in Waterloo Region, and has received numerous awards in the technology community where he lives. But Virtual Causeway isn't his only business. He also co-founded the School of Rock, which is a guitar school for children, and he also enjoys spending time with his family in the great outdoors. Please join me and welcome Rick Endrulat.
Really happy to welcome Rick Endrulat. Welcome, Rick.
Hey, Glenn. Thanks for having me.
Talk with you. Sure. So we got into this conversation and we want to let our audience know about what we've been seeing in the world of B2B sales. You are embedded in this world all day, every day. And you even had a chance recently to get out to an event that is going to give the state of the nation for sales. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So first of all, thanks again for having me. And I love talking about this stuff. It's my day-to-day life and has been for the last, I don't even want to say how many years, because then
I
don't want to age myself. So I just got back from the Forrester B2B Summit in Austin, Texas, which was the Serious Decision Summit for years. And it was actually a really interesting show. And I think the reason that got us talking was that it was, we had talked about just some of the things that I learned and how it was really interesting to be at a live conference again, first of all, an in-person conference. And I think probably it's usually the first kind of big B2B show for the year. And I guess just the timing this year with everything opening up, it was just the show to be at. And it really felt like we were back in 2019 from a conference standpoint because of the attendance. There were a lot of people there, good attendance, and it just felt like nobody was really thinking about the fact that we're just coming out of this pandemic. Hopefully coming out of this pandemic, whatever, depending on what your opinion is. And it was a great show though, because it's been, I didn't realize until I was there that it's been so long since I've actually been in one spot where there've been so many vendors and so many tech vendors all in one place, and a lot of B2B marketers and salespeople as well in the same spot talking. It was just crazy it was very surreal experience, but it was, from my standpoint, it was awesome because this is the stuff that I do from daily. This is what my company does. I'm always talking to B2B sales and marketing folks. And it was really great to be there live and to actually see what some of the trends are for this year.
Yeah. And, as you said, it felt like it was, like 2019 again.
Right.
And yet that's 3 years.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
is there any one thing that did stick out in your mind as what people were talking about in 2022 that
Yeah.
is different from 2019? I know that AI was one of the ones, it was certainly there in 2019, but is that or something else, sticking out in your mind as a very big deal in sales?
Yeah, the focus was a very large focus was on AI, and not simply just AI for the sake of AI, saying this is, a cool technology or something that can, do this or that. It was actually, how can AI help you and help you make your customer's journey more seamless and actually help you reach more customers and create a better experience for your clients. So, which is a little different because, before, so let's say 3 or 4 years ago, as I would be at either Dreamforce or I'd be at this conference and they're talking about AI, it was very product centric. Like,
Yeah.
here's the product stuff that we can do with AI. This time it was very much, okay, look at your buyer's journey. How can AI help you in different parts of this journey? And how can you help make a better experience for your customer, as well as help you from a resource standpoint be able to do more with less?
Yeah, pretty important. We have an economy that, it's nice that it's heading back in the direction of 2019,
Sure.
but we've got our own challenges right now. And yeah, the gee whiz factor isn't going to be enough to let us take an idea and go to our CFO and say, could you just sign off on this?
Sure. Sure.
So, would there be any one part of the customer journey? And, as it helps, you might want to tell people a little bit about how your involvement in marketing automation and
Yeah.
CRM, kind of narrows down where this AI might be
Yeah.
relevant.
For sure, and it's actually interesting that you talked about the CFO, because um, another takeaway from the conference was just about budgets. I think for a lot of companies that have been, so I like to go to a conference or a trade show and spend a lot of time looking at the vendors and seeing how they're marketing. So not just absorbing content that's being provided by the research firm Forrester, but also taking a look at the different vendors and seeing what they're doing and how they're marketing themselves. And this year, for sure, it seemed like, that 2 years of no event budgets, they definitely decided that they wanted to spend it this year. And we're, in terms of just the giveaways and the swag and the events that they were running from the vendor standpoint individually, every night of the conference. So that was actually really interesting to see that it seems like a lot of this pent up budget was
Yes.
being spent, which is kind of cool. So it's good to see that people are spending
Yeah.
money.
And maybe that bodes well for people's technology purchases. Who
Hopefully,
knows?
hopefully. I think I think the next 3 to 6 months will be really interesting to see if that's a trend, and if we actually see that the technology buying cycle and that budgets are opening up. Well, I guess we'll learn. But in terms of the what I learned at the conference, specifically from the AI standpoint, so my company, Virtual Causeway, we basically are a demand gen agency, and we've been for 20 years now been helping um, anybody from large enterprise to smaller, more emerging demands or scale or more emerging brands or scale up companies, basically helping them sell and market their stuff. We do everything from helping them to really understand their ICP and their ideal customer profiles, whereas their target market, help them acquire and build their strong customer database or target database, and then actually start doing marketing campaigns to reach out to them, doing outbound and inbound campaigns. And so this is the world that I've lived in since, back in the day when I used to work at a company called Sybase. So it's certainly something that we get involved with our clients very closely in terms of understanding their buyer's journey and how they market and sell their products. So understanding how AI could potentially help at different steps in that journey, I think, is really interesting to me, and is more on the customer acquisition side of things. So that's everything from understanding how you can have that very first initial contact with the customer that's through some AI, or even inbound leads coming through, as well as ways to automate. Like marketing automation is something that we've been involved with, and the very first marketing automation tool I used was back in 2000 called Rubric. I remember I used it at Sybase, and I went through a week-long training course on it. And, marketing automation tools have come a long way since then. But, ways that you can automate the process and figure out where you can actually use technology to move people through the funnel is, I think, really key, and it's important. But then there's also still this human element that I think is extremely important when you're looking at enterprise sales or complex sales, because you need to have an actual bi-directional conversation where you can qualify somebody, have a conversation, then understand what their needs are before you actually have one of your sales team or your account execs talk to them. So I think it's always about balance as well. So it's, using technology in the right way, but not losing the human element, which I think is really important in, enterprise sales.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like it's often been mentioned, especially by technology providers, that a sales development rep or maybe an AE could have the information at their fingertips, right? That is
Sure.
the ideal situation, so that when they have that conversation, they get as far as they can. They're not annoying the person with some of that really basic, name, rank, serial number stuff. Let's hope that it's getting better. But I think we've also got to contend with the fact that sales has been in a strange reality for the last 3 years. And it seems that some of them, they knew their reality of being road warriors, right?
Yep.
And then they were suddenly asked to do everything that they had done there on virtual calls.
Yep.
And now we've got a little bit of the events coming back into play, maybe a little bit of external, field visits happening too. This is, I can't think of anything larger that has confronted your enterprise salesperson. Maybe not so much the inside SDR, but definitely an AE.
Yeah.
This is huge. And I think your experience at the show bore out that they're feeling a little bit of this warp that we've been in. You said you didn't have a great experience as a person who was trying to talk with vendors at the show.
Yeah. Well, so you said a couple of things actually that were, you always say things that are interesting, but you said a couple of things just now that were interesting. And when I first started Virtual Causeway back in 2001, we really focused our efforts on being a remote virtual team that can help our clients in terms of outreach. So basically what we know as SDRs today, that's what we were starting off in 2001. And I remember talking to clients at that point and really having to convince them that a lot of the work that was being done by field salespeople, especially in the enterprise space, that a lot of that could actually happen inside. And so there was this big shift even when I was working at Sybase in terms of bringing the outside sales team and bringing more inside and making it more efficient and being able to cover more territory. And so there was already that big shift happening. And so it was interesting that it's taken this long to get to the point now where, because of the global pandemic, we were forced to actually pull everybody inside. So immediately all Salesforces became 100% inside sales.
And there was no more debate.
Correct. There wasn't an option. And it was interesting. And I didn't like the reason, but I loved the fact that it happened, because this is something that I've always believed as, from the sales standpoint, there are multiple channels for communicating. And how often do you really need to be sitting there in front of somebody to give them a sales pitch? There are lots of different ways to communicate, and there's a lot of ways that you can communicate in a bi-directional way. And sure, for some instances, it might make sense to be there in person, but doesn't mean that you have to have a field rep that's based in Manhattan full time to do that. You can go in, once a quarter and do a sales call, whatever it is. So it was interesting to see that this kind of major shift happened. And as you mentioned, for some salespeople that are used to more traditional sales means or used to being in the field, it's tough for them to get used to that. And one thing I found at this conference especially was, because I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to this, and I love sales process, I'll go to talk to every single vendor and scan my badge just to see what the process is. Right. Now, unfortunately, my email inbox just blows up because of that, because now I'm getting so much stuff. I have to start unsubscribing, but I'm just interested to see what happens. And my experience both at the show and the follow-up has been kind of crappy, to be honest. It's like, with 2 years of not doing this, it's like we've almost forgotten how we're supposed to be treating a trade show or an event. So pre-show marketing was kind of horrible. It was very last minute. I was getting invited to these customer dinner or client VIP dinners the weekend before on the Sunday before for a dinner on Monday night, for example.
Yeah.
And for anybody who's got any kind of schedule, I mean, that's not enough notice. But even at the show, walking through, and I always walk the booths. Like I said, I scan my card and I'll talk to people, and the qualification was horrible. I mean, even some of these vendors that are, quote unquote sales technology vendors that just all they do is help people sell.
Oh, the irony.
The irony, exactly. I walked up. So I actually walked up to two specifically that deal with sales engagement platforms. So companies that all they do is they provide software for SDRs, and they provide templates. So they basically use anything. They should have their process down because this is what they sell.
Yeah.
I went to both of them, scanned my card. First one, I told them I'm looking at a potential solution because I wanted to see what they had. I gave them some information saying I'm looking to talk to somebody in a week to get a demo because we're going to make a decision in the next 30 days, most likely. And I got my card scanned, and there was nobody else in the booth. I was the only person there. So it wasn't that they were too busy. They scanned my card and said, "Okay, great. See you later. Thanks. We'll follow up." And I haven't received one follow-up from them either, by the way.
So and you, like, if there were a script, and I believe that they would have had a templated script, it sounds like you went through bullet by bullet everything
I qualified myself.
Yeah.
I qualified myself, and I was proactively providing my BANT criteria: budget, authority, need, timeline. And I basically started, and they seemed so disinterested, I just stopped. It was ridiculous. And so I went to their competitor that was around the corner, did the same thing. Once again, didn't seem to care about any of my information. And there were 3 people working in the booth that I was talking to, no other prospects around. So it's not that, once again, they were too busy to speak to me. And I at least got an email follow-up from these guys, but that was it. So, very, very disappointing in terms of just understanding the sales process, and even the proactive follow-up has been really bad. And the one other thing, at the show that was interesting was, back in the day when I was at Sybase and I used to manage our trade show booth, if we ever saw more than one employee talking to another employee in the booth while there are customers around, our booth manager would lose it. Yeah. And meanwhile, as I'm walking down the hall, that's all I saw at this conference. It was because I think part of it is larger companies. They've got people from the marketing team coming from different parts of the country. It's the first time they've been together too. And they're just so excited to talk to their colleagues.
It's a junket. Yeah.
Yeah. And, but I mean, it just makes a really bad experience as a prospect.
Yeah, no, I've remembered from booth days of the booth manager being very good at kicking shins without a prospect noticing.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a couple of things here. The first one is, it is a moral crime that they did not take the opportunity while you were there. The time sensitivity of it is there, but maybe we can imagine a better world where someone would want to take advantage of this. But I know the old thing that CRMs were flagged for was the information will eventually make its way into the CRM, but right now it's sitting on some scribbled notes on the passenger seat of the rep's car. Like by maybe next Monday, it'll be in. So, we used to have that problem, right? Where
if you can read the notes underneath the ketchup or the mustard or whatever, that's on there too, right?
Yeah. But that the pieces that were needed for any automated workflow to happen, they weren't there. So it was just a non-starter. We now seem to be in a world where AI is, you talked about scanning a booth pass. Yeah. Okay, so no human data entry needed there.
Correct.
All the information, hits. If you're on an ABM list, it matches. If there's a workflow item that says follow up immediately because it seems there's a high enough score, it's all there. Now we're coming to the side where the AI is great, but it's only as good as the humans that can carry out what the AI is recommending.
Yeah, I agree. I think the interesting thing is with a lot of these sales engagement platforms and marketing automation platforms where you can build all this lead scoring into the platform, as well as you can build different sequences in terms of touch points and outbound email and drip campaigns. Sometimes I think companies might rely too much on that and spend a lot of time building this automated process and not realize that, you know what, at some point, a salesperson might just need to pick up the phone and follow up with somebody and say, hey, how can we help you? Right. And I think sometimes we fall back and we rely too much on the technology. And as you said, the automation and the technology you're using is only as good eventually as that human that's going to have that conversation with the prospect, right? I mean, unless you're selling SaaS and it's low cost monthly fees that, it's self-service and you can just purchase and everything online. If it's anything that's more complex than that, or anything that's on an enterprise side of things where you have multiple buyers and you have multiple demand groups, and you have account-based kind of activities, you definitely, there's that human element that it just needs to be there. And so the technology needs to work in sync with the human elements, and they need to actually be, throughout the process, understanding which is it either digital or human, and which touch point is most important at different parts in the buying cycle. And how do you make sure then that you have the right information to the right prospect at the right time? I mean, that's the game, right?
Yeah, and this is where, marketers like those who are listening to this should perk up their ears. We are sales tango partner. We always have been. And the world of sales, the dynamics of selling in the 2020s has, both from technology and from the pandemic been, changed, and it's not going back to the way it was.
Right.
What do you think marketers ought to be doing so that they read the room here and understand what their partner needs now, as opposed to maybe what their partner needed in the 2010s?
Well, I think as marketers, it's an exciting time that we're in right now, first of all, because there is a lot of cool technology out there. I mean, the technology has grown to the point where there are a lot of different tools out there, and you can create a really intelligent marketing and sales tech stack that can help you in your process. So I think that's really important. I think that's the good news. The bad news is sometimes we like to use technology because it's cool and it's shiny, and we might focus a lot on the cool stuff, but not understand exactly what is the most relevant to what we're doing or what's going to have the most impact. So I think, any way that sales and marketing can be aligned in terms of their needs and understanding exactly how to move their buyers through their journey in the right way, I think is really important. And I mean, companies like Forrester, which and Serious Decisions, which is now part of Forrester, I mean, their whole mandate from day one was sales and marketing alignment, and how to get companies to align, and how companies where they do figure out the alignment between sales and marketing, how they can actually perform multiples higher than companies that aren't aligned, right? So understanding how you can do that and also leverage technology in the same way. I mean, I think everybody's using a CRM. CRM is just, everybody's using it. Everybody's using marketing automation platforms. And now there are companies like, somebody that you've done a podcast with before, our friend Gary at Breadcrumbs, that are actually taking lead scoring and taking it to the next level. Yep. So there's a lot of intelligence you can build into the system, but ultimately lead scoring or whatever you're doing on the marketing automation side of things, it will only get you so far. There still has to be that actual sales interaction, and then understanding how to help the buyer to actually purchase your solution. So I think it's, once again, just marketing needs to understand, how can we best support our sales folks? And there's always this quality and quantity kind of debate, right? So sales will say leads aren't good enough, so marketing needs to hold on them longer and nurture them longer. So then marketing does that, and 6 months later, sales says, I'm not getting enough leads.
Of course.
So there's always this flip, right? So I think it's just, being the constant alignment of sales and marketing is just understanding where you need to be and figuring out what the right lead scorecard is that you can then provide the right thing to sales. And what are the technologies that can help you there? I mean, a lot of it's on the front end, but as long as sales is using the technology and using the CRM and then feeding that back to marketing, then I think you can actually start doing some good stuff.
Yeah. You've said some extremely insightful things there. And the takeaway for me with using this kind of dance partner idea is that marketing needs maybe some finer instruments, some finer knobs knobs that they can turn. They can't just say, okay, well, send it all to sales or don't
Right.
send it at all to sales. And I've seen, sadly, my fair share of times where sales and marketing sat down to talk about MQL definitions,
Right.
and the decision on whether a prospect is right or not has ridden on the fact that sales is having a soft quarter. And so now we just open it all up and send them all.
Yeah.
You talked about there being new technologies. Are there any that, come to mind that marketing might say, you know what, we don't look at this for evaluating prospects that we might send to sales? One that comes to mind is intent
Sure. Yeah.
software platforms, right?
Yeah.
That are reading signals all over the internet.
Yeah.
Is that, or are there any other tools that you think most marketers should be looking at now, so that when the time comes that they have to do that knob turning with sales, they actually have some good information on hand?
Well, and I think one thing that, from a conceptual standpoint or from a strategic standpoint, I think most companies that are selling enterprise, at least, are all agreed that they need to have some sort of account-based approach. I think that at least from a high level, most companies would understand that and would agree to that. Once again, for enterprise sales, right? I mean, for other stuff, it may not be the right way. So from an ABM standpoint, I think a lot of things can help. Intent data, I think, is extremely important. I think that there are a few different vendors out there, and the results I've seen from our clients, as well as stuff that we've worked on, is kind of varied. So third party intent data sometimes is not great. Obviously, if you're a large enough organization, you have a sophisticated enough tech stack where you can actually gain a lot of that intelligence from firsthand. That first party intent data is obviously great. But the third party stuff, I think, is still something that we're still seeing how it comes about. And but anything that can help you understand if someone within your targeted account is evaluating a solution like yours, I mean, that's huge from a rep standpoint and a sales rep standpoint. I mean, I would love to know that, right?
Yeah.
And so there are different ABM tools out there, as well as, like you said, intent data. And data itself is actually really a huge part of any kind of marketing stack now too, especially since with, the pandemic and a lot of shuffling around and people not coming into the office, actually having valid data of your contacts, even your customers, is really tough nowadays. So understanding, there are people like ZoomInfo and a lot of data sources like that will have a lot of direct lines, and they'll have a lot of, mobile numbers. But I mean, the data quality is not the same as it used to be, mainly because, the whole work environment was up in the air for 2 years, right?
Yeah. So, and if you haven't blown the dust off of that process to get that data, you might be putting more faith in it than you should.
Exactly.
Let's say that somebody, looks back at how do we grab that, certain piece of information, and it says in there, get the intern to call a switchboard. Yeah. Okay. That's got to change.
Sure. And
that's not working anymore. Even if that intern is gaming it and filling up your database, that data is worthless.
Well, I used to love when I was in sales, I managed the inside sales team at Sybase. I used to love when we would get target lists and the phone numbers would be whatever the directory assistant's phone number is for that area code, right? 555. I can't remember what it was.
1212.
12. Yeah, exactly. So just different area code in front of it, and I'd be like, "Wow, this is great data. Thank you." So it's and I always tell my clients, I'm like, you can have the best you can have the best product in the world, you can have the best marketing campaign in the world, but if it's not getting it to the people you need to get it to, it doesn't matter. No. So if the data sucks, it doesn't matter what you're selling. It doesn't matter how you're selling it, because you're just not going to get in front of the right people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it may come with technology, but at the very least, look at your process. If you're in marketing, see what you can provide, even if it's on the way to justifying a purchase of the data. You were talking about intent-based service. We marketers sometimes forget we could jump into Google Trends. We could jump into our Google Ads account and look at competitor terms that have been typed in we get these numbers. We know if the volumes are going up or down.
Mhm.
This all would be helpful if one were trying to make a case for budget.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because it's also, I think also one thing that we forget as marketers is we forget to look at our demand waterfall and look at our funnel and
Yep.
actually set some benchmarks, right? So look at, your inquiry to MQL to SQL to close, whatever your stages are, whatever you call your stages, and try to get as much data and go as far back as you can, and then take a look at what the average conversion rates are, what the average time to convert is from stage to stage, build some benchmarks, and then see, as you start tweaking with some of these things and as you start changing and trying different marketing or sales tactics, then at least start comparing back to what those benchmarks are. I think a lot of times we just start making a lot of these changes. You mentioned before, the dance and the analogy of the dance, and also making this, slight little tweaks here and there in terms of what you're doing. Um, I think we do that a lot, but a lot of times we don't then take a look back and try to measure it against the previous stats to see if it's actually been improving or not, right? So
Yeah.
there are a lot of variables in any kind of marketing or sales campaign, and it's just a matter of understanding, when we tweak some of them, is it actually improving or not?
Yeah. There's also some discipline. If we are going to try and measure
Yeah,
it, we need to sometimes prioritize not to change everything all at once, because in the following period, if we'll get those results. Maybe if we wanted to change some of those results, we did too many things in this, so our data is now all muddy. We don't know what we did
yeah,
that made the change.
yeah, yeah,
So the discipline of saying, okay, in this 1 month period, we're only making a change to how we migrate
yeah,
MQLs to SALs.
yeah,
Okay,
sure,
all right,
yeah,
let's pick that, and then we can get to the other ones in time. But let's
yeah,
find out what really needs our help today.
for sure.
Um, can you give any general advice, having uh, been so long immersed in the world with salespeople and knowing what they've gone through in the last couple of years? Can you give any advice to marketers who need to understand how they can best help sales? But to do that, they need to understand how sales looks in the 2020s.
Right. Thanks once again for not saying I'm old, but you just said, you're just saying that, I've been in this business for a long time. Thank you.
Sure.
Um,
You do
I
the same
think,
for me.
yeah, yeah. You're the host, so I'm trying to scale back a little bit. So I think, from a marketing standpoint, really the best way to support sales, or at least understand what sales is going through, is, this is a new world. I mean, for a sales rep nowadays, their biggest challenge now is actually connecting to a prospect, having an actual conversation, in any way, digitally or face to face or on the phone, whatever. It's tough to get that connect, and there's a heck of a lot of noise out there. I mean, there's so much email, so much digital and social and everything happening, that from a prospect standpoint, there's just a lot of stuff being thrown at you all the time. So I think,
Yeah.
for marketers, ways that you can help sales understand better who their ideal buyer is, and understand where they live. So what are the where do they look for reviews on technology? Where do they what are some of the third party sources that they leverage a lot? I mean, that kind of thing, so that the sales folks can get a better understanding of what their needs are and where their pain is, and potentially find out ways, well, maybe these are ways that we can actually communicate with them. I mean, the biggest challenge right now for sales is, how do you get somebody on the phone? And the sales cycles have all increased too, and there's more people involved. So it's really pulling together this whole demand unit or buying group within an account now. So it's just lots more people they have to pull in. And when, especially, everybody's working remotely, or people don't even have phones in a lot of cases anymore, like, how do you reach them? So I would say, from a sales standpoint, most of the sales folks I know, their biggest job right now is just trying to figure out, how do I even connect with my prospects? Like, connecting is just a huge issue. And then, of course, if you do have somebody that comes to your website, or you do have somebody that's a hand raiser saying, hey, I'm interested, you need to jump on those, and you need to be all over them. Like, I mean, since there's such a spread from not being able to connect to somebody, and then when somebody does want to talk to you, you need to be all over that. If you're not, you're going to lose them very quickly.
Yeah.
So it's really important to make sure that you're at least supporting them in the buying process, and that you're all over these leads as they come in. I mean, especially the ones where people say, I'm interested in talking, or people like me saying, hey, I want a demo in the next week because I'm going to make a decision in 30 days.
Hello.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, would you rather spend time trying to contact those people in an account where where you actually can't even reach them live, or the person that says, yes, please contact me, you just ignore, right? So it's about really prioritizing and making sure that you're spending your time in the best places.
Yeah. Love the spirit of what you've said there. If I were to boil it down to like a couple of things that I see people doing that I wish they would change because of it, a web form, it has been known to happen that a person who has been already reached out to by sales, and that sales feels that they're moving towards getting a demo, that person will sometimes fill out the web form if all of a sudden they've got a cancellation on their schedule and there's time free and they can't find the rep's contact info. The marketer who gets that needs to jump on it. You are their eyes and ears in that channel. So help them. And by the same token, if they are saying, we have an account here, we think we're quite close to doing things, re-examine your process. Do you have a suppress list? Put them on it. Don't hit them up with the stuff, as you say, that is just adding to the cacophony of what they're hearing. And I guess the last one that I think marketers should take advantage of, because today's sales rep is more wired than ever. They're sitting usually on stacks where, let's say, they have a sales enablement tool that records their calls. If you're a marketer, go listen to some. They worked so hard to get to that. And you now have the chance to actually hear what the prospect knows and doesn't know. It tells you if they registered on anything that your collateral was saying, or they might surface something that you have not got any collateral on, and that your company can help there. So there's just so many ways, but I love your spirit of understand them and then help them.
And I think the best marketers I've ever worked with are the ones that as they are either launching a new product or changing something from a messaging standpoint, or within their first week of a new role, they go and spend their time with sales. They do joint. They sit on sales calls. They listen to recorded calls, and they hear what the customer is actually saying. That, I think, is a huge part of being a strong marketer, because all of a sudden, the sales folks are the people, the feet on the street. They're the ones having the conversations. And if as a marketer, you don't understand exactly what's coming back or what's resonating, what's not resonating, how are you going to, craft a message? How are you going to decide what your strategy should be? How are you going to decide what your product roadmap needs to be? I mean, you need to have that conversation.
It's not only a help, it could be a career booster. And I think it even gets down to the existence of the company, because last time I checked, a marketer doesn't themselves bring in any revenue. So if you want your company to do well, if you want to do well, then give your salespeople what they can do so that there's money kicking around on payroll day.
Exactly. I joke. I joke with a few colleagues that sometimes it seems like as marketers or even operational people that we're all about order prevention versus or sales prevention. That's part of the challenge is rather than creating friction in the sales process, let's figure out how we make it easier, right?
Yeah, and I think we're hopefully going to be in a better place now than we have been, and as long as we're paying attention to it. Rick, if people want to know more about Virtual Causeway or about you, where would you send them?
Sure. So the website, virtualcauseway.com, or LinkedIn. I have a blog and a weekly newsletter that goes out. That's called What Do B2B Marketers Do Now, that we started doing at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's basically just, what's happening in the world of sales and marketing today, B2B sales and marketing, and what are some of the interesting things that people are doing, and what are some stats that can help you as you try to market and sell your product.
Yeah, so I'll underline that, because you obviously read a lot. You obviously are passionate about this, and I've seen a number of great ways that your content just brings to light things that we should all be thinking of. No, thank you. Thanks for doing it day in and day out. Once again, thanks so much for coming on, Rick.
Thank you. Happy to do it.
Great. So that's going to wrap it, guys. And please, if you learned something today from what Rick said, try to implement it in your own company with sales, and share this episode with maybe a marketing colleague who needs to hear it so that they can help out their sales team. Hopefully that there's been something that Rick has said today that has helped make your funnel even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.